Let's take a quick look at Gliffy here. We just want to run through some of the basics of getting started and a little bit about using these stencils and creating UML diagrams. When you first log into Gliffy, assuming you have an account, you'll arrive at this screen in which you can open an existing document or create a new one. So we'll start by creating a new one. Notice we have a lot of options here, such as Venn diagrams, org charts, things like that. So, the ones we'll be interested are the software design and UML. And eventually we're going to just go to creating a blank document, but first we want to start with some of these stencils and talk about a few of the issues. Let's just pick class diagrams as an example. Notice here that in the class diagrams we have icons for classes. These icons are they're colored in the background. Notice the border here is gray, things like that. So what we want to do is, when we create UML diagrams, is to make them very simple. We want to stick to just boxes with no fill. We want to have all our lines be black or text be black and things like that. So using these templates can get you into a little bit of trouble. You can go through and clean them up. You can remove formatting. For instance, you could select an icon and then click on the Edit Properties dialog here. It'll bring that up. If you don't want color, you can just select no fill. That'll remove that. If you want to change the color of the line, of course, you can select line color. If you don't like the thickness, you could change the thickness, but we'll stick with that default. Here we have these inheritance icons, so we could select those, and same thing, go through and pick line color, thickness, and those kind of things. So starting with the templates can be a little bit problematic. Also, if we notice when we grab a class icon and drop it in, notice it comes in looking different than all the rest. It does have a white fill, and the white fill isn't so bad, but we essentially don't want to have blues and grays and things of that nature, because that is not part of the UML. So using stencils, be a bit careful. Let's go back to starting over. So we won't save our diagram here. We'll create a document, and what we're going to do is just go to a blank document. This gives us complete control over what it is we want to do. So if we wanted to create a class diagram, for example, we use the class icon, just drag that over. In this case, for some reason, the default template for the icon is to have a shadow, and we don't want a shadow. We want it to be very plain. So we go into turn the shadow off. Alright, we're good to go. And we can move the icon around and resize it all we want. When you want to add, say, a name, or you wanted to add attributes or operations, just go to the double click on the compartment. Well, I should make it an out, huh? Okay. You can have multiple lines in here if you wanted. So if you needed to put a stereotype on there, something like interface, you can add that in. That's acceptable. Whoops. Just a couple things when we resize. It turns out, because this is a single identifier, what's really nice is it won't let you go any smaller than it needs to be able to keep all the letters on the same line. On the other hand, if we have something long, it does end up wrapping. So let's add in an attribute here, something like, let's see, I don't know, something like that. This becomes a string. Notice as we got to a certain point, it did a word wrap, but we don't want that to happen. We want everything to be on the same line. So we just resize it accordingly. So you can bring multiple class diagram or class icons in. Notice after we configure the first one, the second one, there's no shadow here, so it reflects that. Then we can add connectors, and this will give rise to some interesting problems here, or outcomes. So here notice we have the border on the class is about 2 pixels wide. This is just 1 pixel wide, so we'd want to go clean that up a little bit to keep uniform. Alright, and then these two things are fairly even. If you notice these, we connect the connector to the icon, so now it's anchored there. If I were to move this, notice it stays together. If we aren't perfectly lined up, we get a little bend in the line. We want to avoid bends, especially when there's no reason for them. So here we would want to adjust this icon until it was even, so we have a nice straight line. As we add in information here, the icon will grow in size, and we might have to go back and rearrange, or so if we resize it, notice that it changes that. So we have to be a little careful when we're creating our diagrams. In terms of, say, things like if you want to have a class which is two classes which are a subclass, we can use the inheritance notation here. We wanted to have a single contact point when we could do something like this, of course. What that looks, I mean, we have bends in the line, and there's no real reason to do this. The better idea would be to have these things line up. So we would have them both connected to the middle, and notice it lines them one on top of the other. And then we might want to, bring this over just so it looks a little bit more evenly spaced. Again, we have to go back and fix our line thickness. All right, notice here, I don't know if you can, we can zoom in on here. This is a little bit off, so we can zoom in and see what's going on. Notice it's about one pixel off. Oh, we just have to select this. Oh, there we go, that fixed it. Okay. And then we can go back to a normal size. As you're going along, if you don't like this grid in the background, you can always adjust the document properties. You can adjust the overall size. You can change the background color. If you don't like the grid, you can just deselect this. If you want drawing guides, you can enable that. But you can play around with how these things work if you'd like. A couple other things, just in terms of formatting. If you want to select, you can just highlight all the things you want to select and then just move it over. Apparently this, oh, there we go. When you're doing with other diagrams, one thing you could do is we could have done something like this. If we put another class on there, we may want to add this. In terms of again, by doing this, notice we have a little bit of a angle. We want to avoid that, so we line these things up. And then you also want to line up the these classes. There's no reason to have this one much farther. Maybe you might have some diagramming rationale for doing that. But generally speaking, you want things to line up and look nice, and those kind of things. If you want to add labels, a little caution here. If I were probably to fix that line length or thickness, just as a little bit of a caution. If you were to add a label, you could just start typing, and if you notice the label gets put right on top of the line, we want to avoid that. So what we'll do is we're going to remove the label. If we want to have any kind of label on our diagram or on our lines, we're going to just create them by using a text box. So we select a text box, drop it down here, and suppose we wanted to have indicate multiplicity right there. Oops. We just do it in that fashion and resize accordingly if you'd like. The size doesn't particularly matter for the outcome; just makes it a little bit easier to manage. So we can add that. If you want to have arrows, you can come here and select the type of arrow that you want, that kind of thing. So pretty much, it's a drawing tool. You have some conveniences in terms of the stencils here. You might have to tweak the stencils a little bit to get them to work the way you want. But for the most part, it's just a drawing tool. So we've talked a little bit about bends. We've talked about not having any wrapping. Labels should be close to the line. You don't want this label up here like that. You want to have it down, near where it's supposed to be applied. You also want to avoid having lines that cross. So doing something like this doesn't particularly make any sense. Again, you can clearly clean this diagram up by bringing this over. So there's really no reason to have things cross. If you were to say, if you were to do something like this, suppose for some reason you did have it like that, and you're like, you know what, I don't need this to be on that, with an angle. Just bring it over and line it up. Here we have a bunch of bends, we want to avoid that, so just select and clean the diagram up as much as you can. Make it look as clean and neat as possible. For the most part, what you'll have available is all the stencils you need. The only one that's missing is with respect to the sequence diagram, and the interaction fragments is a bit problematic. So we'll just scroll down here and take a look at how this works. We'll bring a couple participants out. Notice these have, for whatever reason, just a single thickness in their line, so we might go in here and adjust that to make them a little bit thicker. Okay. What's nice about this stencil is you can just highlight it, and then if you want it to be the lifeline to be a little longer, you just drag it down. It doesn't affect the size of that box, which is kind of nice. So something like that. If we were to label this, this might be something like participant A. I'll just call it participant so we can see a little better. Notice that the name is underlined. That indicates that it's an object. The stuff we'll be doing in this course, that's perfectly fine, but the general form is to not have it underlined, in which it just makes it a participant for a role. So we'll go in, highlight that, and the way to get it underlined is to click on the U, and we are now into the notation that looks more like a participant than an actual object. As we were saying, you can have activation boxes. They're just rectangles. You just grab them. Again, readjust the thickness if you would like. If that's the thickness you're using. You can have them nested. If you're going to nest them, just layer them and adjust them as needed. Your arrows, of course. Whoops, a little too thick. Okay, arrows for messages. Just go across, just clean, make sure they're nice. Start at the right point, end at the right point. If you have to, you can go in and just adjust the size. It's ideal to have the tip just touch the, if I can get a hold of it, to just touch the line like that. Not a huge deal, but when you're trying to pay attention to details, it's useful. As I was mentioning, the execution fragments aren't. If you look here, they're not part of the stencil. This is something you have to build yourself. And if you remember, when you actually in this case we're writing, this is an object and it has, we might want to avoid that. But anyway, we have an execution fragment supposed to have a little place for a label up here. So you have to build that one yourself. It's really not too hard. First thing you might do like this, have loop is the name of one of the fragment types. Okay, so we go back to here, we go up in here, and then the way this works is there's a line that goes underneath it, so you might need to zoom in to make it a little bit easier to get where you want it. So here we go. Whoops, got to change that. It's not supposed to be an arrow. Whoops, that figures. All right, so we got that looking the way we want. So move this. Over like this. This has to be just a hair shorter. Actually, no, it needs to be a little bit longer. Then we grab another line. Comes down like this, and then the connection between the two is there's a 45-degree angle. So, we have to actually draw these ourselves. A little bit of a hassle. But in the end, it's really not all that big. So something like that. Right, so that's what one of those things look like. It should be transparent because that would be the easiest way to, so you can have your arrows lay on top of it or look like they're contained inside. So we will make this transparent. So once you have this, you can just select everything. And you can cut and paste. For whatever reason, the hotkeys aren't working on a Mac. Okay, so we have that. We didn't get the text label, but we can easily add that. So once you build one, it's just a matter of cutting and pasting. So it's a little bit of time consuming, but it's worth it. In the end, you have a nice clean looking notation like you're supposed to. All right. So that is pretty much the essence of creating these diagrams. The only thing left we want to do is take a look at how to export these. It's fairly straightforward. So I'm going to, just to make things look a little bit, since we have these two things far away, I'm going to highlight all these things and delete them. Whoops, how did I not get that? All right, we'll go back up to the top. And now I want to export just this diagram. So what we'll do is select File, and you can export as PNG or JPEG, whatever you want. I'll do PNG. It exports it. In order to export it, you have to save it. So I will save it as test. All right. And it exported. Okay, to this right here. Once we have that, we can then paste it into anything we want. So in this case, since I'm on a Mac, I'll use Pages. Okay, so we'll just grab this guy here, drop it in, and now it's available to use. Okay, this works out pretty well. It's a reasonable size image. Notice though there's a lot of blank space up here, so you might want to perhaps change that a little bit. We can take these icons and we can drag them up more to the corner like this, and then if we were to export it, okay, go down here, grab our new one, drop it in, and so we have it a little bit cleaner. So again, we're just taking a little time to be a little more careful with what gets output. You also may run into a trouble, for instance, if we were to duplicate this. Oops, that's not what I want to do. Okay. Highlight that. Let's actually do the copy and paste now. Okay, so we might do something like this. Suppose we have a really wide diagram. Now we go to export it. Okay, where's our Pages document here? There's our Pages document. We grab our file. Okay, it's fairly long. In fact, it's too wide for the document itself. So you'd have to go do some resizing here. And that's not too bad when we do a resizing. It fits fairly well. Yeah, so try to avoid having really long or, well, actually wide documents. Long isn't so bad unless you go past a page. So think about that. So if we were to do this, probably a better way to handle this would be either to separate this to two diagrams and generate two images, or think about rearranging things so it looks something like this. Bottom line is just about creating clean diagrams, and since you're going to be dumping everything into some sort of word processor, you're going to want diagrams that fit well within the bounds of your pages.